Jeremiah chapter 8. At that time, says Yahweh, they will bring the bones of the kings of Judah, the bones of his princes, the bones of the priests, the bones of the prophets, and the bones of the inhabitants of Jerusalem out of their graves. They will spread them before the sun, the moon, and all the army of the sky, which they have loved, which they have served, after which they have walked, which they have sought, and which they have worshipped. They will not be gathered or be buried. They will be like dung on the surface of the earth. Death will be chosen rather than life by all the residue that remain of this evil family, that remain in all the places where I have driven them, says Yahweh of armies. Moreover, you shall tell them, Yahweh says, do men fall and not rise again? Does one turn away and not return? Why then have the people of Jerusalem fallen back with a perpetual backsliding? They cling to deceit. They refuse to return. I listened and heard, but they didn't say what is right. No one repents of his wickedness, saying, what have I done? Everyone turns to his course as a horse that rushes headlong into battle. Yes, the stork in the sky knows her appointed times. The turtle dove, the swallow, and the crane observe the time of their coming, but my people don't know Yahweh's law. How do you say, we are wise, and Yahweh's law is with us? But behold, the false pen of the scribes has made that a lie. The wise men are disappointed. They are dismayed and trapped. Behold, they have rejected Yahweh's word. What kind of wisdom is in them? Therefore I will give their wives to others, and their fields to those who will possess them. For everyone from the least even to the greatest is given to covetousness. From the prophet even to the priest, everyone deals falsely. They have healed the hurt of the daughter of my people slightly, saying, peace, peace, when there is no peace. Were they ashamed when they committed abomination? No, they were not at all ashamed. They couldn't blush. Therefore they will fall among those who fall. In the time of their visitation they will be cast down. I will utterly consume them, says Yahweh. No grapes will be on the vine, no figs on the fig tree, and the leaf will fade. The things that I have given them will pass away from them. Why do we sit still? Assemble yourselves. Let's enter into the fortified cities, and let's be silent there. For Yahweh our God has put us to silence and given us poisoned water to drink, because we have sinned against Yahweh. We looked for peace, but no good came, and for a time of healing, and behold, dismay. The snorting of his horses is heard from Dan. The whole land trembles at the sound of the neighing of his strong ones. For they have come and have devoured the land and all that is in it, the city and those who dwell therein. For behold, I send serpents, adders among you, which will not be charmed, and they will bite you, says Yahweh. Oh, that I could comfort myself against sorrow. My heart is faint within me. Behold the voice of the cry of the daughter of my people from a land that is very far off. Isn't Yahweh in Zion? Isn't her king in her? Why have they provoked me to anger in their engraved images and with their foreign idols? The harvest is past, the summer has ended, and we are not saved. For the hurt of the daughter of my people I am hurt. I mourn. Dismay has taken a hold of me. Is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no physician there? Why then isn't the health of the daughter of my people recovered? It's a sad, sad chapter, and it's describing the finality of the judgment that is going to come on Jerusalem. And I don't know about you. I grew up in an evangelical world, and we always heard sermons. Now, not so much by my parents, but, you'd hear visiting speakers and other people, and they would preach things like, today is the day of salvation. You ever heard that preached? If you don't get right with God right now, tonight could be your last night. And then often there's a story of someone that was going home from the meeting, and they didn't go out the front to give their heart to the Lord. And that night they were in a car crash or some tragedy happened, and, we don't know if they're with the Lord now or not. So, that's all completely true. salvation is offered to you now. Today is the day of salvation. And the Lord is so patient and he appeals, and you may have tomorrow, but you can't guarantee it. And so, but imagine, someone in that situation that turned their back on the gospel in a gospel meeting, then they did die that night, and then they're standing before the Lord and it's now the judgment. Well, it's too late. The judgment is going to happen. And this chapter is kind of like written to Israel in that situation. Israel is, or Judah and Jerusalem in particular, are standing kind of like before the Lord, and it's too late. There are things in this chapter that are described, which are described as now they're happening. And, it says things like the tombs will be desecrated. And so it says descriptive things about what's going to happen, but it says things that are just sad. Look at this, verse 7. It says, "The stork in the sky knows her appointed times. The turtle dove, the swallow, and the crane observe their time, but my people don't know Yahweh's law." And so we've got verses like this, which the Lord is highlighting the real problem. The real problem with an animal, they've got instincts built into them. So these migratory birds, no one ever showed them where to fly, but they fly south for the winter, or they fly north for they just know where to fly and they just go to the right place. Who taught them? It's instinct. And God's saying, the stork has its instincts, the turtle doves have their instincts, they just do what they're supposed to do. But my people, they don't even have a basic instinct of what's right. They're just broken completely. It's like they've got no conscience. You can take a young child who does do the wrong thing, but they know they shouldn't. We have this conscience that the Lord's built into us, and yet people can harden their hearts to the point where they don't have a conscience. Well, see, that's what happened to Israel. That inbuilt thing that God put there wasn't there anymore. Look at verse 5. "Why do the people of Jerusalem fall into perpetual backsliding? They cling to deceit and they refuse to return." So here's a people who it's like they have an addiction, but they refuse to acknowledge they have an addiction, and therefore they cannot sort it out. And I've never been in AA, but I've had people in the church over the years that I've known who've come through AA, and I really respect that program. And there's various steps along the way in the AA program. There's 12 steps. Well, one of the steps you've got to get to is this point of getting over your denial. You've got to get to, basically, you can't get started unless you recognize you have a problem. You can't overcome your addictions unless you recognize you have an addiction. And there's so many people that don't think they're an alcoholic. They think they just like to drink a little. And, well, that's called denial. Well, the Lord's saying to Israel that they are in perpetual backsliding and they refuse to return. Well, they can't even get started because they don't acknowledge they have a problem. So he says things like this: "Everyone from the least to the greatest is given to covetousness. Even the prophet and the priest deals falsely. They have healed the hurt of the daughter of my people slightly, saying peace, peace, when there is no peace." In other words, the people in charge, even the priests and the prophets, were saying nice things like peace, peace. They were trying to make things be good. They were smoothing over whatever problems there appeared to be, but they needed to uncover the problems so they could be dealt with. So they were making it slightly better by avoiding it, but in the end, the problem had to be exposed and dealt with, and they were not dealing with it. And so, terrible things happen. Verse 16, it says, "The snorting of horses is heard from Dan. The whole land trembles." If you know your geography of the Middle East, of Israel, when they went into the Promised Land and they split the land up into all the different tribes, the tribe of Dan was placed at the very top. And the Babylonians came from where? From the north. So the Babylonians are coming from the top down. So what's the first part of the land they're going to get to? Dan. And verse 16 says, "The snorting of horses is heard from Dan." So, well, here they come. And then it says the whole land trembles. So the judgment is on its way, and it's being heard, and the whole land is scared. Horrible, horrible. And then, verse 19, it says, "Behold, the voice of the cry of the daughter of my people from the land that is far off. Isn't Yahweh in Zion? Isn't her king in her?" 100 years before this, the Assyrians came and attacked. And they went through the land from the top to the bottom as well. And when they got to Jerusalem, King Hezekiah, he cried out to the Lord, and Isaiah the prophet got a message, and the Lord said, how dare, basically the Lord said to the Assyrians, "How dare you challenge me? I am God." And the Lord killed them and drove that army off. We covered all that in Isaiah chapters 36, 37, 38, and 39. You can watch those videos. And so a lot of people were saying this peace message that I just mentioned. And when the Babylonians were coming, there was a whole bunch of them that were saying, this is the Lord's country. This is the Lord's temple. He's going to deal with the Babylonians just like he dealt with the Assyrians. So they were looking back into their history at what happened like 100 years earlier, saying, that same thing will happen. But no, the same thing does not happen. Because God says in verse 20, just the very next verse, he says, "The harvest is past, the summer has ended, and we are not saved." In other words, your chance to be saved has gone. It's a little bit like, you hear those stories of people that say, ants, they save up food, or squirrels, they save up nuts for the winter. Well, imagine if you didn't save up your food for the winter, and then winter comes. It's too late. There isn't anything you can do about it now. You're going to starve. And so the Lord is saying the harvest is past. The summer has ended, and we are not saved. In other words, the day of salvation has passed them by. So finally we get down to the last verse, verse 22, and Jeremiah writes, "Is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no physician there?" In other words, isn't there anything that can be done? Isn't there any medicine we can apply to this sickness? And the implied answer is no. There's no medicine. It's a fatal disease. It's going to kill them. And, we've all met people that have been given the death, it's like where they go to the doctor and the doctor says, "You've got 4 weeks to live." It's kind of like a death statement over their life. And, for Christians, sometimes we can go to the Lord and we can get that thing overturned, but we can have a miracle. But for many people, it's like it's too late. They could have gone to the doctor earlier when they noticed those, strange lumps in their body. They could have got it checked out, but they said, it'll be fine, it's nothing. Well, it's too late now, barring a miracle. Is there anything that can be done? Is there any medicine? No, it's fatal. And so the Lord is saying right here in this chapter 8, the season has passed. There is no medicine. It's going to come down to the judgment. The horses are in Dan. The armies are coming. The whole land is going to tremble. And so it's far better to know the truth, right? Now, if you were an individual person in that land that realized this, what would you do? You'd leave. You would go to Egypt, or you would go to some other place and get out of there. But the problem was the Israelites hadn't been listening to the prophets all along, and now that Jeremiah is coming along and saying all these things, they're still not listening. I remember years ago being at a funeral of a guy that didn't live a particularly good life. But in the funeral, the minister, who wasn't an overly thoughtful minister on this occasion, he said that this brother is with the Lord. He said, "We don't have to worry about him now. He's in heaven." And I remember after that happened, I was at work and I was talking to the brother of the guy that died. And the brother of the guy that died had a similar lifestyle. They drank a lot of beer, they did a lot of gambling, they never went to church, they swore, they lived however they wanted, they entertained evil thoughts, that they weren't godly people. And this bloke says to me, he says, "I'm so glad that I'm going to be able to go to heaven just like my brother." That's not an exact quote, but that's the gist of it. And I remember thinking how horrible it was that the minister gave that assurance to everyone about that guy. So that the minister's trying to cheer everyone up by saying, don't worry about him. He's not in hell, he's in heaven. But the thing is, the minister didn't know that. And by saying that, he actually spoke a peace when there was no peace type of a message to all those people. And all those people concluded, or at least the guy I spoke to concluded, that he didn't have to do anything. He was just going to he could just live his normal life the way he was living, and he would end up in heaven. It was a terrible mistake. And I remember when my, there was someone quite close to us, and I had to do their funeral. And I'm pretty sure they did go to heaven because they were a really weak Christian. They loved the Lord, but their sin overwhelmed them. And so the life that they lived wasn't a really good example. But when I prayed about it, I felt like the Lord said they were with him. But when I did their funeral, I never said that. Because even though I feel like they were with the Lord in heaven, I was not going to use that to comfort people and give everyone a false sense of assurance. Instead, what I said was the gospel. You say things like, it's appointed to people to die, and then the Lord will judge. And you say, for everyone who loves the Lord, he has a place for them. So you say things like that, and you cause people to think about the true and meaningful things in life. Jeremiah was certainly someone who spoke the truth, but a lot of the people in Israel at the time, the prophets and the priests, they didn't. And so the whole nation was under a terrible situation which could not be cured. And that's why the book of Jeremiah is one of the saddest books in the Bible. Father, I pray that we would not be people who can't take correction, and we would not be people who can't hear the truth. I know there are a lot of people like that, but I pray that the place of truth in our culture and our society would be restored, and that your word would have its way. In the name of Jesus, amen.